Hello, everyone. My name is Lance Vogt, and I am an educator. And I think it's important for students and society alike to start thinking about the value of education and two approaches that I see happening in the modern focus between society and students and teachers and educators and educational institutions on the approach to education. So these two current approaches that I see are a value of outcome versus a value of knowledge. Historically, education has been a proxy in terms of degrees, grades, tests, papers, etc., have all been proxies to help assess a student's value of their knowledge. How much knowledge have they acquired? What skills do they have? And when they go out into the workforce, what are they going to be able to bring to the table to their employer? So when we focus on a value of outcome, it tends to be that we are focusing on a specific metric, grades, completing a test, checking boxes, getting a degree. And while all those things are valuable journeys, the problem is if your focus is on that being your end goal, the bigger picture is lost. We tend to optimize around getting the task completed versus focusing on the reason why we're supposed to be there, which is to build skills, communicate with others, uh, learn how to problem solve, learn the base knowledge of the subject matter of the course. So that way you're not having to always be using some sort of encyclopedia, cell phone, LLM, some sort of knowledge center as a crutch to be able to remember, recall, complete any task. So let's focus on value of outcome a little bit more closely here. So again, when it comes to valuing your outcome, you tend to optimize around a specific metric. So students tend to be very focused on the grade. They tend to be focused on getting an A. That is the end all be all goal of the course. Now, that might be because of growing up through generations. We've always been told, okay, you need to get good grades in this class. You need to be a straight A student. You have to do very well on this test, this assessment, because it's the thing that matters the most, because it'll get you into a good college. And if you get into a good college, then you're set for life. Even though in reality, once you get into a good college or a good grad school or anything like that, that's when the real work begins. That's kind of the starting line to success. Unfortunately, a lot of times, again, as societies become more competitive, markets have become more competitive, the baseline student has more education, it becomes more difficult to separate yourself from the pack. And so, unfortunately, the approach that maybe your parents or your grandparents have imposed on you of this being the way to success is no longer necessarily relevant. And so, when you focus on the outcome, you tend to be task oriented. So, if there is a syllabus or a list of tasks or homework assignments or tests, you tend to focus on completing it, checking the box, and then as you check all those boxes and cross them off the list, you have less to do. You're almost done with the class, and then you can move on to the next class or the next semester or the next thing in your life. Or maybe you're really busy, and so juggling school with work or raising children or something like that becomes too much. And we put so much pressure on ourselves as people and society, and the economy puts so much pressure on us to perform and do this and do that, uh, in term relative to how much we're being compensated. And so there's some shortcuts and corner cutting and all this stuff that we try to do to kind of make it through the day. And that's normal human behavior, but we kind of have to remind ourselves that if we continue down that pathway, we run into the risk of falling into this metric trap where we take shortcuts and then we don't really end up with anything on the other side other than like uh basically a memory box with a diploma and a transcript that says I did this work, but what did I really get out of it? And so we also tend to exploit the metric. So if you're in this situation where, okay, it's only about the goal, you don't really value why you're there because it's just a bunch of paper pushing and busy work, People tend to optimize around that and strategize around it. So in basketball, over the last 20 years. Again, how do you win a game in basketball? You score more points than the other team. Okay, well, in the 70s, they created what's called the three-point shot, which means that if you shoot from a longer distance, you end up getting more points. You get rewarded for shooting from a further distance because the expectation was the farther you are from the hoop, the more difficult it is to score. So if you look at this chart here, on the left-hand side in 2003, 2004, which is actually the first season that LeBron James was in the NBA when he was 18 years old, you see that primarily there was a lot of mid-range shots and shots kind of near the paint, and then a lot less frequency around the three-point line. But if we fast forward 20 seasons to 23, 24, you see that basically there's really no incentive to shoot from mid-range because it's worth the same as dunking or shooting a layup or shooting from a very short distance, whereas you get basically 50% more points if you shoot from behind that three-point line. So you see basically the entire three-point line is where, around it is where most shots are shot from. And in the paint, if you have a really tall player or you have an open basket with a layup or on a fast break or a dunk, if you have an open shot there. So basically, data science and the fact that the goal is to score more points, we've rewarded shooting three-pointers and really easy shots in the paint. So we end up with a shot chart that looks like the one on the right versus the one on the left. And that's why scores have gone up and three-point shots have gone up, and the type of player in terms of who is rewarded and gets long extensions and contracts has changed over the last 2 decades. Because once you've realized that that's the goal, is that metric, then it doesn't matter why that was chosen as the metric. It only matters that you exploit it to the best of your ability. So in society, if we valued money, then the goal is acquiring as much money as possible. Money is supposed to be a proxy of value and success and all these other things, but if we've had centuries of using the same currencies and same money, we tend to try and exploit money as the means of wealth acquisition versus maybe some other thing that society might value instead. This is also the reason why you tend to have students that are leaning on large language models that or look up ChatGPT to just get an assignment done. So if you assign a paper as an instructor or a faculty member, they tend to just be like, well, if this computer program can basically generate it for me and I've got something else I want to do. So if you're in K-12, oh, I've got a sporting event or an extracurricular activity. If you're teaching at college or university, it's I have to go do my part-time job to make rent, or I've got this thing I want to do, or if you are an adult, more adult learner, maybe you have children, you've got to take care of them, you don't have a babysitter, so you're just trying to find shortcuts to get the task done because you're not necessarily seeing the purpose. You're just kind of following and putting trust in, okay, well, this is the way I've always been assessed, so this is the right way of being assessed, and this is the way I'm going to learn knowledge. They must know better than me. Unfortunately, faculty at some institutions are falling into the same trap. They're like, okay, well, I've got to do all these papers, I've got to finish all this stuff. And so they end up cutting corners, and then everyone's cutting corners, and nobody's really actually focusing on the reason why we're here, the reason why you're spending so much money, and that is to learn. You want to be able to get a job, you want to be able to be successful. So going back to this whole uh, exploitation of a metric thing, there are two things. So I have an economics background. I'm an economist. I'm an economics faculty member. And I'm also a data scientist. So economists would say, okay, data science is kind of a little bit of economics, a little bit of something else, but you could say I'm both. So from the economics perspective, I would say the saying or the kind of the proverb is that you give me the incentive and I will give you the outcome. So if you know what the incentive and the motivation is, you will figure out how it's going to be exploited. So there are many books and there are many examples of a situation where you see, okay, well, what is the goal of this? Okay, well, if the goal is this and it creates an incentive to achieve that goal, then I'm going to tell you exactly how this is going to play out. So if laws have unintended consequences, if policies have unintended consequences, usually the unintended consequence is an incentive that the people that were making that policy didn't think about, and then those who reacted to it discovered kind of the loopholes and the pathways after the fact as time has gone on, and then you end up with the outcome that you end up with. From a data science perspective, the perspective is once you define a specific method for measurement of value, the goal becomes exploiting the measurement and the purpose for the measurement is lost. So this has to do with money, this has to do with sports, board games. If you've ever played anything in your life or done anything in your life where it's competitive or there's a very significant like dependency of that outcome going your way on your quality of life. The reason why that measurement or that metric was created was not because of the fact that that's what's important. Really, what's important is it used to be at the time in which it was chosen as a metric, a good barometer, good indicator for the behavior or the personality or whatever society was like valuing. Unfortunately, as time goes on and time attenuates the connection between the initial purpose for it and the actual metric, it becomes an exploitation game. It doesn't become about the real purpose for it anymore. And so as time has gone on with colleges and universities and K-12 and all these other educational institutions over a century plus, and with technological advancement and new frontiers in terms of knowledge and medicine and science and math and technology and all these other things, we are still using the same ways in which we assess people that may or may not really be good indicators anymore. And so what has happened is over time, as students have discovered, and smartly so, when to take advantage of shortcuts and when to not, because maybe they've got too much going on, or maybe just because they're younger and they're going through all of their life changes, they don't really have the motivation and push to be able to do everything the right way all the time. And so that's why it comes down to teachers and instructors constructing the course in a way, and maybe even reconstructing courses now in the age of AI to try and push students in that direction. We can't expect them to be perfect all the time, and so there needs to be some sort of change that happens there. So the real thing as to why people go to school and the reason why they learn has to do with the value of knowledge. And so if you have kind of agreed with this whole value of outcome as a student, you're like, yeah, that's kind of how I think about things. I don't know if I want to be here. I don't really know. My parents have told me to do this, or I've been told by society that I need to do this, but I don't really know like what the purpose of this is. Like it seems like it's a lot of money and it doesn't seem like I'm going to get a good job on the other side. Maybe there's a different pursuit I need to take, and maybe that's a good thing to think about before you start school. But once you're here and once you've committed to being here, you have to realize that the grades aren't necessarily what matters. What really matters is the value of the knowledge that you're going to get. Really, what matters about going to school, really the reason why education is so important for a good society and for a good kind of social fabric, is that you acquire skills and you learn how to problem solve and you get a broader understanding of the world. So, skill acquisition, so maybe it's learning how to write, maybe it's learning how to give a good speech, maybe it's learning just basic fact knowledge about a bunch of different subjects, and you might not know outside of participating on a quiz show or a pub quiz or a trivia show that you need to know that, but there might be times in which it's useful. It might help you build a bridge in a communication, get a deal if you're working in business or international business. You never really know. And it might help you understand human behavior to help manage better. Just as important in that is problem solving. So when you're going to try and get employed by somebody, They don't want someone that they're going to have to basically walk and handhold through all the time. It's a very big time suck, and it will slow down the efficiency of the business if if they're always having to kind of tell you what you need to be doing. There could be times when they're not there and you have to solve the problem and figure it out for yourself. So you have to be able to adapt to new situations. You need to build a toolkit for yourself that takes a base set of skills and knowledge, and then you can apply that base set of skills and knowledge to an area that you've never dealt with before. If you become a parent or you are a parent, you know that you have to do this every single day because you're never going to know the answer to everything. And yeah, you can look things up, but sometimes you don't have time to, and you kind of have to do the best that you can. And so maybe the outcome isn't perfect, but they're going to be much more likely to give you a job and trust you or give you a promotion if you have you can demonstrate the ability to adapt and demonstrate the ability to problem solve and not necessarily need anyone to help kind of fix your problems for you. And then just getting a broader understanding of the world or a better understanding of the world. Um, People come from different countries, different cultures, different beliefs, different experiences, different foods, different languages. So just exposing yourself to a little bit of that can give you the ability to adapt to new experiences, new cultures, new countries. So if you travel for work or if you move to a new city and they have different standards and customs and foods and traffic patterns and entertainment and all this stuff, it allows for you to build a good connection and a good rapport with new colleagues, new friends, new family members, if you have the ability to kind of keep your mind open about things and make sure that you treat everybody with respect. When it comes to completing tasks, knowledge acquisition is slower. Mastery is very slow. So learning the knowledge and then repeating that knowledge and building from it a little bit at a time takes a very long time. So think about learning an actual language or learning any sort of skill set. It takes time. Learning a language takes time. You can learn vocabulary quickly, but learning how to speak it contextually, it takes a long time. So from the time you were born to the time that you were able to kind of fluently speak in your native language took years. So don't be surprised if it takes the same amount of time as an adult. So learning these things and people come from different starting points, so it might take you longer than somebody else, and that's okay. It's not about where you are at the starting line, it's about where you are kind of at the finish line. And where are you and what levels of success do you have? And there's always going to be people that basically start ahead of you and will always be ahead of you, even if you work harder than them. It's just a fact of life. That's just kind of how inertia works and money works and numbers work. There's always going to be someone ahead of you. And so you have to focus on your own race. And so we can always fall into bad habits of, oh, I don't really want to do this. I'm procrastinating. I don't feel like doing this today. But unfortunately, those bad habits don't go away if you keep training yourself and keep automatically resolving to that. So using a large language model to write a paper or write a discussion board or try to help you through a test or whatever, yeah, we all have access to that. Maybe they'll change it to make it more restricted and maybe you have to pay for it. I don't know. Maybe we'll figure something out. But for now, not really. Open season. So if you want to use that, the reason why it becomes a useful tool is if you already have the base knowledge. So if you want to code and you want to vibe code, like if you know how to code, then vibe coding is easy because you can suss out all the mistakes and figure out how to fix things on the fly. But if you don't know how to code and you vibe code, okay, maybe it works for what your task is, but if you're gonna go work and be a programmer, or work in computer science or data science or software development or something like that, there's a huge risk that once you actually get dealt with a real task, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to learn on the fly. And so all that time of knowledge and mastery pays off in that part. Experience matters. It doesn't matter how old you are, as long as you have the experience and you acquire that experience kind of the traditional route, You're going to be significantly more valuable mid-career, late career than you are than someone who's kind of just grown up in technology and just trusted technology to know it. Because the thing is the knowledge from LLMs is not perfect. It can be adapted, it could change, it could end up becoming degrading over time and become not very useful. Completing a task doesn't take very long. So if you try to exploit things and look things up and try to find things, maybe you learn from that process and there's some learning that happens there. But if you just are doing it as a means to an end and you don't actually like remember it, retain it, and keep working at it, then that knowledge never really happens. You never move over from that completing a task part to that knowledge part. And then the person that does retain that knowledge is going to be much more competitive on the job market than you are. And so the thing is just having the degree is kind of like the base level, and you need to be able to separate yourselves from that. So having that knowledge and those skills is really what's going to separate you. So at the end of the day, what do employers actually want? Employers want problem-solving skills, they want independence, they want communication skills, they want adaptability, and they want innovation. So they want someone that can solve a problem without needing their hand held. They want someone that can work on their own and not have to be given tasks every day to be productive. They want someone that can communicate the message, whether it be to a different audience, a manager, a potential client, whatever. They need someone that's adaptable. Now, not adaptability necessarily in terms of like them taking advantage of you and making you come in on off days and stuff like that. Of course, they'd like that, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is that you can adapt to new situations. So if you need to move from working in one business sector to another business sector with a similar skill set, you're able to make that jump. So journalists can move into PR. Maybe you work in communications or supply chain for one company, but then someone wants it for another company. Well, it's not going to be a one-to-one connection, but you're going to have a lot of overlap in the experience and skills that you have, and you could adapt so that becomes a much more lucrative skill to have that will allow for you to get employment. And then lastly, innovation. Even if you work for an employer or don't work for an employer, being able to innovate and come up with new things instead of just kind of doing the same thing that you've done for your entire career, that's not going to work. Technology is going to change, so we're all going to have to adapt and innovate with it. So, since the pandemic, technology and education has innovated and adapted with it. The workplace has adapted and innovated from it. And so, there might be a similar paradigm shift in the middle of your career, and you have to be able to innovate with it, or else someone else will. And one thing that you should also always remember is that learning is expensive. It takes a lot of brain power, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money if you don't have someone paying for it, government, parents, scholarship, etc., or working part-time, full-time. Even if it's free in terms of dollars or euros or whatever currency that you are paying your tuition in, it has a significant time and energy cost to invest. And so modern technology has conditioned us to devalue the hard work and investment. Oh, we can just look something up. We can ask an AI to tell us the answer. We can have shortcuts. We don't have to actually do the work. But then at what point, what are we living in? So if a teacher basically AI is to grade and you AI to do an assignment, why are we here? The reality is that learning is expensive. You need to put the work in. I know that short clips on social media makes us have shorter attention spans, and having easy tools to find answers makes it so we don't feel like we need to put that work in. But the reality is that when push comes to shove and you really need to solve a problem quickly, and it's very important whether to keep your job or to keep your family safe or whatever the circumstances may be, the experience and the knowledge that you have now will allow for you to adapt and survive and be able to thrive in changing environments. We don't know what the economic landscape is going to look like in 20 years, much less 5 years from now. We think we do, but we don't know for sure. We don't know what it's going to be dependent upon. We don't know how things are going to adapt, whether it's geopolitically, or economically. And so being able to have those skills is going to be very, very critical. And so make sure that the time and money is worth it. Make sure that when you have that degree, yeah, you like to wear the t-shirt or the sweatshirt of the college that you went to and you put the sticker of it on your car, your backpack or whatever. But the thing at the end of the day is that what you learned is the most important thing. The experiences that you had, the skills that you acquired, that is what's going to be your legacy. That is what's going to be your employability. That's going to be the thing that actually gives you the value from the education and the time that you're investing in your education right now. And one important thing is that not all degrees and grades are equal. You can get an A in one class, someone else can get an A in the other class, but someone with an A that just basically found shortcuts and exploited things, okay, maybe that's a useful skill for something, but not necessarily in terms of the long term. But the person that puts the work in and actually understands inside and out all of it and get the A, that is a much more valuable A. And just having a degree and just saying, oh, well, I got the degree, but don't remember anything from it. When you go to an employer and that's all that's on your resume or your CV, they're going to want to know, okay, well, what else did you do? Were you working during that time? Were you doing internships? Were you creating something? What skills do you have? Do you have the skills necessary for this job? And if you don't, then that's going to be a differentiator between you and somebody else. So just because you have a degree doesn't guarantee you anything. It really just is an indicator and as more people get more higher level degrees, whether we're talking about bachelor's degrees or graduate level degrees like master's and doctoral degrees, the signal becomes noisy, meaning that like maybe 50, 60 years ago, it was easy to say, okay, well, like not that many people go to college, not many people get through it. So if you've gotten through it, then you're head and shoulders above a significant portion of the population. Now that tons of people are getting degrees of different levels, it allows for employers, one, to be pickier, which basically means that even if the job doesn't require that level of knowledge, there's so many people with that level of knowledge, they can use it as a proxy of a baseline where if you didn't go, well, then what are you doing with your life? And so it becomes noisy, it becomes a baseline. So you have to have it, but it doesn't really separate you from anybody. So they want something more. So you have to bring to the table that something more that's going to separate you, and the easiest way is to basically take every class that you've taken, every skill that you've acquired, and keep honing it and adapting it and practicing it. So that way, when you get to that interview or you get to that job, you basically show that you are ready to take over and do things. Yeah, you'll need some training, but you'll be able to take that training and actually learn from it. The same thing with AI. AI is a powerful tool. Just like sports cars and heavy machinery and airplanes are powerful tools. And yes, they can do amazing things, but if you don't know how to use them properly, they can do horrible things and or not be very useful at all. So to you, it's really about putting that commitment into your education and learning. And again, this might be a shocking thing to hear, but education never has and never will guarantee you success. But it will always increase your probability of success. So just because you finish with a degree doesn't mean that you're going to get anywhere with it. It really just increases your probability. And if you focus on the knowledge and skill acquisition, it's going to allow for you to adapt to these changing economic circumstances, adapt to changing life circumstances, and it'll give you the ability to pivot. So, from a personal perspective, I've had significant roadblocks in my life. I've had educational success, I've had educational failure. And there were pathways that I thought I was going to go down, and they were very linear. And then I ran into brick walls and roadblocks, and I had to pivot. Focusing on knowledge and focusing on skills has allowed for me to adapt to these ever-changing circumstances and has allowed for me to be successful beyond what I thought was possible in a career pathway that I wasn't expecting. So I had a very linear trajectory, go to this school, go to this school, get this degree, do this career. And guess what? Like I didn't do that career and I pivoted to something else and thought that was the golden ticket. That didn't work out. I had to pivot again and then I finally ended up in the career that's proving successful for me and giving me the life that I've wanted. So it's not going to come overnight. It's not going to be perfect. But even if you can't find the job that you're looking for, having these skills allows for you to be independent and maybe one day you decide, you know what? There isn't anything out there for me. There's this thing that I want to do. I know I'm good at it. Let me just make that my career instead. And you start a business and you're independent, and then you're successful that way. But if you just follow tasks and you don't learn anything from it, you're not going to get there. And even if you do all the right things and say all the right things, it doesn't guarantee you anything. It might just be that the job market is bad at that time and you have to be able to pivot. And when you pivot, maybe you can come back to that sometime. But if you pivot and you end up successful, then your life continues moving forward in the way you want to. Maybe not exactly the way you envisioned it, but it goes in the way that you want it to. So the last thing I want to share with you all is to make it count. I want you to take some time, if you're a student, to think about why you're in school and what your approach is going to be for your educational pathway. What are your goals? Because I don't think your goal is to do well in my class. I don't think your goal is to uh, get a degree. I think your goal is something bigger than that, and you have to figure out how you're going to match up what you're doing here with what your goal is and think bigger, but also realize that it's going to be a long, frustrating process, and you need to make the commitment to appreciating that and doing that. Because when you're older, you will appreciate all of the things that you took the time to frustratingly go through when you're younger and when you're learning. And even if you're not young, it's better to do it now. The best time to do it now to commit and to embrace that process is today and not tomorrow. And so the goal of doing well on assessment is fine, but the most valuable piece is going to be the knowledge and skills that you can use for the rest of your life. And from a personal perspective, as an educator, I always appreciate effort over outcome. So I always see that the classroom is your proving ground to make mistakes, learn, uh, screw up, get something wrong. Perfection is not expected, but growth is. So be sure to ask questions, take breaks. If you don't get it the right time, take a break, take a deep breath, get a meal, take a nap, try again. And slowly but surely, you'll chip away at the gold mine that is the knowledge that lies underneath the surface. And that's really what this is all about. So maybe you have thought about it this way, maybe you don't care because you're not necessarily here, but take this moment and think about why you're here, what you're doing, how you've approached education your entire life, and realize that maybe you just need to tweak how you're focusing on it because of the fact that you need to value the knowledge, you need to value the skills, you need to value the experiences. It might be that you started business with someone that you had a side project with in a class and you built that connection. If you just show up and leave and do the work, where is that connection going to come from? So make it count. You're spending a lot of time on it. You might be spending a lot of money on it. So make sure that instead of exploiting goals to go back and play a video game or to do something else, make sure that you're really invested in the time, really invested in the process. And I guarantee that in the long arc of your life and career path and goals, you'll be much more likely to be successful if you take a value of knowledge approach versus a value of outcome approach. Thank you for your time.